Over before I get to see what my test is for the evening. Let's start with what did we do yesterday? How are we feeling about the Netflix project? What did we learn from it?
Well, we definitely learned. I learned a little bit more about Flexbox and how using like different what was it Elements? Is it Element?
Mhm.
That's what it is. Yeah, like I was just doing the extra credit the other like last night, and it definitely took me a while because I was thinking like, okay, this a line item gotta go this way, but it's going in this way. So I was getting a little confused, but I managed to get through it at the end though.
Yeah, Flexbox is one of those things that starts out very easy, and then you see how many options are really built into it, and it can get really complicated really quick, right? And so it's definitely a powerful tool, and one that I don't recommend always starting with, right? I definitely recommend the grid system first, but even within the grid system, there's only so much you can do for alignment. And so that there are definitely some CSS properties and options available to you outside of Flexbox and Grid. But between Flexbox and Grid, those tend to be the two most powerful, the two that you can build the vast majority of websites with. And I think a lot of people underestimate layout, right? They start building their HTML, they get their words showing up, everything looks good. And then in your head, you go, well, I just want to get this one item over here. How do I do that? And if the answer isn't the grid, oftentimes it is Flexbox, and that is something that you can definitely harness, whether it's through Bootstrap's classes directly or getting down and dirty in your CSS and writing it yourself. Between those two methods, you can build pretty much or lay out pretty much any website that you're trying to accomplish. What else from yesterday resonated with you? Any light bulb moments? Anything that you're still struggling with? Any sections of the code that you would like re-explained?
For me, it's definitely the utilization of divs. Divs definitely help make things seem like in an orderly fashion when creating the MaxFlix website. Where at first it seemed like, oh, everything is has to be in a special like format in HTML, when actually it could be just div and a little bit of classes to make everything all neat and presentable.
Absolutely. And we underestimate divs because they're kind of invisible, right? But then we underestimate oxygen and that's invisible as well, right? And we know how important that is. So divs are kind of unique in that they can be infinitely nested. You can have divs that are 10 levels deep and the browser does not care at all. But it's really important for the layout of our code. So oftentimes we look at the divs and we go, well, how important can those closing tags be? And the answer is very, very important. And so that's when we lean into comments. That's when we lean into the text editor, highlighting our divs, our opening and closing divs. That's when we lean into indentation. And all of that combined is kind of what helps us understand where those opening and closing divs are and what that layout is. And oftentimes it's easy to get lost in them, right? And so although we didn't do it for the Netflix project, it is a good tool to lay things out either visually or in an outline. And if one works for you better than the other, or if you can jump right to the outline without doing the visual layout, that's totally fine. But one or the other, if you were struggling with divs, can kind of help you plan that out, as well as using the tools based in your text editor to make sure you're tracking the opening and closings. Anything else from yesterday that we want to touch on in stand up?
Can you go over the oh, I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
Okay, I was
Uh
just thinking about sorry, I was just thinking about the design element. I'm just thinking about how white letters appear against darker backgrounds and putting shadows on it just so that it's easier for the user to differentiate between icons and whatnot and letters.
Yeah, that's a great thing to throw out because oftentimes we want to use background images because they can be a very visually striking aspect of our design. But what we often don't plan for as designers is what happens when that background image changes, right? So you may have heard the phrase Web 2.0 or Web 3.0. Well, in order to know what 2 and 3 are, it's kind of important to know what Web 1.0 is, right? Web 1.0, genesis of the internet, early 90s, the whole notion of I can write out some code, I can publish it on the internet, and people can see it. So I like to think about Web 1.0 as kind of a news website, right? I can go there, I can read it, but I can't interact with it at all. The only interaction that I have is navigating to different parts of the website. Web 2.0 really most people say it was like Facebook that started it all, but MySpace and kind of mid to late 2000s really started the trend of Web 2.0, which was, well, we can actually introduce the notion of a database. So it's not just all HTML anymore. We can have users interact with the website, save those interactions in a database, and then have the database generate the HTML for us to include their content. And that is not just social media that really started all of Web 2.0. That is the whole notion of web applications as well. So things like online banking were driving Web 2.0. The whole notion of I can upload content. And the reason I bring that up is because, of course, Facebook was a huge success because people could upload their photos and share them. And so oftentimes when we're thinking about our design, we lose control over what that design is going to look like every single time because we don't know what users are going to upload on their own and what images they're going to be styling. So Web 3.0 is arguably trying to be the next new thing. I don't know that it is fully agreed upon as an industry yet, but Web 3.0 brings us to the decentralized notion of the web. The whole notion that we don't need to deploy all of our code to servers. We can implement tools like blockchain and verification of activity, kind of the trailing logs of things in order to not make all of our web servers hosted by major companies like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, who are the three biggest hosts based in the US at least of web servers. So anyway, I'm not fully sold on Web 3.0 yet. Maybe that's because I'm a Web 2.0 developer. Maybe it's because I'm a little biased because I've built my career on Web 2.0. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of context when you are talking to other developers and they may mention Web 3.0. That's the whole notion of decentralizing our internet so that we don't need to rely on these larger web hosts to make all of our code work. Anyway, yes, all background images, and sometimes we don't get to control the styling of our images. So the text that we put on those images, little tips and tricks that we can do, like either text shadows or the other technique that we used was alpha on that TV rating. So we put a background that is still semi-transparent, so the image starts to come through it, but is not fully opaque or fully transparent. Anything else from the Netflix project? Joe, did you have something you wanted to throw out there?
Yeah, could you just go over the I don't know, was it a method, a class, the media tag?
Yes, yes. It is I'm curious if W3 Schools calls that they call it an at rule, which I have never heard it called that. But let me start there and then I'll switch over to our code. So again, MDN and W3 Schools, both a great source of information. The problem that I have with MDM is that it is written from a very experienced technical perspective compared to W3 Schools, which tends to spoon feed you the information a little bit better, which I actually prefer. So if we go into MDN, MDN can get a little complicated right up at the front, and they give you a lot of links where you're like, oh, an at rule, that sounds interesting. And then you start going down a path there. Neither one is necessarily better. I just prefer W3 Schools because it tends to be a little bit easier to understand out of the gate, for at least for beginners. And so app media rules are queries, right? So just like our selectors are queries that allow us to target certain sizes of our screen, among other things. So app media queries can be used to say only apply the CSS if someone is on a mobile phone and they're in the landscape screen perspective. You can target certain resolutions, and you can also target print media with this as well. But the general idea is that once we get into JavaScript, we have this notion of an if statement, right? Which is basically some logic that says only apply this code, only run this code if this thing is true. And an app media query in CSS is going to do the same thing. So what we used it for in our HTML and CSS for the MaxFlix project was saying, hey, by default, displaying none on the screen size. So no matter what screen size you're on, I don't want that to show. Hide it. And again, that screen size was this little tiny div at the bottom that said your screen is too big or too small. Then we wrote a media query, and there's some weird syntax here to say basically the media query is based off of the screen size and only apply these rules if the max width of the screen is below 650 or the min width of the screen is above 1400. So those are kind of confusing because they're inverse, right? We think about below something as the minimum size, but we actually are telling the CSS this applies if the max width is underneath this particular size. This is passed in basically by the browser. And the browser, if it supports a media query, will also support passing in the screen information. And it's not technically the screen, it's really the window size, not the entire screen. But anyway, whenever we put things inside these curly braces, we're saying only apply these CSS rules. It doesn't just have to be one if either one of these conditions is true. Does that help? Cool. Very powerful tool. You use it certainly a lot if you're doing responsive web design. I would say media queries are kind of your fallback solution when you're talking about laying things out, which is often the way that we make sites responsive. We tend to use the responsive classes of the Bootstrap grid. So instead of saying just col6, we'll say col md6, and then we'll say col sm12. And that means, hey, on a medium-sized screen or larger, these two columns should be left and right. But when we get down to a smaller or extra small screen size, make this column be the full width so that it takes up the full row, and then have that next column wrapped down onto the next row, basically. So we'll use that in the portfolio site and see how we use the responsive grid. But app media queries are certainly helpful when we go, hey, we want some CSS to apply differently here if this is a super big screen or a super small screen, or anything in between, really.
On that note, maybe I'm not thinking about this correctly, but when referring to sizes, PX stands for pixel, right?
Correct.
Or is it points?
No,
Pixels?
PT is point.
Okay. Doesn't that get wonky then when you have screens of different like pixel densities?
Yeah, so there's this whole notion of EM and REM, which is relative font sizes that basically say the browser and the device are going to work together to agree that the default font size of a paragraph is let's say 12 points. And then based off of the resolution, it will say 12 points is 1 REM. And if I make it 1.5 REM, it's going to be 1.5 times larger than the resolution that we set by default. So REMs are relative, and I'm blanking on what the EM stands for. It used to be more of a concern when basically the first Windows computers started supporting higher resolutions. And when the first iPhones came out supporting higher resolutions, by the time Android devices got to that resolution screen quality, most of the browsers had figured it out. So a lot of developers will tell you to use REM instead of points or pixels because they're all relative to the resolution of the screen. Nowadays, it's less concerning for that to happen because the operating systems, whether mobile or desktop, tend to handle it better. What you will find, however, is that this with device width and the initial scale 1.0 will certainly impact responsiveness. So fonts, I don't want to say it's unimportant to use points or pixels over REMs. But I will say it is very important to set this with device width initial scale 1.0, because otherwise, when you first load the page may be too zoomed in, or you may find that something like your Bootstrap container can't detect the full width of the device because this meta viewport tag is not set.
So should I work with like REMs instead? Is it like kind of an easy conversion that I can make in my own code, or is there like other downsides to using that instead of PX?
No, REMs are pretty safe to use. I can say that in all of my mobile site design, I have not switched over to REMs because while they were more important years ago when they hadn't worked through resolutions, it's better solved for now at the browser and OS level. So REMs are probably better. I can't emphatically say that because I don't work with them a ton. But I do know that there are benefits to using REMs over PX specifically for font size.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately not an expert in it, just because I haven't run into enough problems designing my own sites where I'm like, oh man, this is such a problem. I want to invest in learning that. But that's not to say that you shouldn't. It's just that I'm not an expert in it enough to talk to it. Any other questions on the Netflix site? Any light bulb moments? Anything that we're particularly proud of? Anything that we are horrified of? Anything to review from yesterday?
I I was kind of struggling a bit with the what I think it was like the feature thing on the Netflix at the bottom. I was trying to make it go like at like the far bottom of it. Like I got the images and stuff up like spaced out correctly, but my problem is like having to make like all of it like go down. It's like it's not going down for me. I don't know.
Making basically a new row of all of the images, are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's probably a closing div issue. And so that's what I would encourage you to look into, is saying, all right, am I making a new row for this? And is the place that I'm making the new row still inside my container, but outside the last row that I've created? Because remember, HTML kind of works in that hierarchy of an outline. So whenever we've done an outline before, for non-technical things, that's basically how the browser is looking at all of that. So if you're struggling on something like that, I recommend you book a one-on-one, whether it's adding additional features to the site or whenever you just feel stuck on something. That is a great use of a one-on-one, even for a short little one, just to jump in, screen share through something and go through that. So encourage you to book one and we can work on your code together.
Okay. Appreciate it.
With all of that said, let's look forward to what we are doing today. Sounds like you guys came up with a consensus. What is my challenge?
Yeah, so I made a poll for us to like vote and stuff.
Great.
So we definitely have it came close though. It came to close to like two like websites. It was close, but I think you know can I share the
Mhm.
okay. This is the one that we agree upon. Uh
Okay.
um go ahead.
Oh, thank God, it's the very old one and not the new one that they just created. I think that was the city of
Who?
Syracuse.
Wait, hey. Oh, the cities. I was about to say who updated the Onondaga County website?
I believe the city of Syracuse just went through a major overhaul. Older websites tend to be a little bit easier to recreate than newer websites. Let me just confirm. Yeah, city of Syracuse
I just
did.
put it in the chat.
Thank you, thank you. I knew it wasn't Syracuse.com, but I couldn't remember which one it was from there. So yeah, a city of Syracuse just redesigned this to like be nice and responsive. A big trend is oftentimes when you can kind of see where the divs are, you can tell it's an older website. So newer design goes for what we call flat or material, which aren't quite the same thing. Apple was the big pusher of flat design. So to talk a little bit, and this is worth discussing for just a second. There's something called skeuomorphism design. Fancy word for basically saying designing things to look like real world objects. So the best example of this is Game Center back in the day on iOS up until about 6, I want to say 6 or 7. They use skeuomorphism design. So when you open Game Center, it looked like poker table, or it looked like uh, a pool table, right? Where the top of the banner looked like it was in leather and they had some white stitching to go across it, and the text looked like it was just placed on top of the table. And Apple did this huge design overhaul and said, that's kind of old school. We're going for flat. And everything is going to be all about really sharp borders, not very high contrast between it. We're going to go for this very simplistic design, which Apple has always kind of been known for in its stores. And a couple years later, Google came out and they said, we want to encourage a design language because we hire thousands of design experts. And what do we have? We have developers coming in and they just start throwing things into their apps and it looks pretty crappy. So we're going to provide a design standard that we encourage developers to follow. And if they do, their apps will look a lot better. And so design standards are kind of the step before a design framework, or a component framework. So we think about design standards as basically a textbook to follow, right? If you follow all of these rules, Apple or Google says that you will have what they consider to be a pretty app. But the step after that is developers get involved, right? And they go, all right, well, if Google says this is what a button should look like, we can make that button. And if any other developer wants to use that button, they can use our framework, our code to do so. And the first time we've seen that is Bootstrap, right? We haven't used a ton of Bootstrap's components, and in the next project, we'll use their nav bar and their buttons and start getting into their component library. But Apple and Google have released these standards. Material UI is a framework that is up to the Google standards of what they recommend. So anyway, you can see there is a big difference between this website, and I'm actually going to do a callback to the Wayback Machine, which allows us to see older websites. So if we take a look at what SEER.gov looked like, let's see. Did they launch it this year? Oh, that's not good.
Oh, and the other website was MySpace. So it was either
Okay.
this one or MySpace. Definitely was a close tie.
All right, let's see if we can go back and see what the website used to look like. Um, No, this is their newer one. Anyway, Syracuse did in the past year or so go back and say, hey, our website's looking pretty dated. They solicited feedback. They went through a whole design process where they not only did mock-ups, but then they sent mock-ups out to the public and they asked for some feedback on it. Of course, Wayback Machine's going to show me up and say, no, this has been their website for a while, but maybe it's further back than I thought when they redesigned this. So, we can certainly go through this design. I will say that this is an older style of website design. This approach to website design was made at a time where Flexbox didn't exist, believe it or not. This is dating all the way back to the fact that laying things out in websites were harder than laying things out in images. And so for a while, they said, you know what? This image will be easier to recreate in Photoshop than it will be to create in our own code. So we're going to do that and throw that in the website and call it a day. The only problem with that is that it's not responsive. So what happens when I get down to a smaller screen size, you'll see what this site looks like. It is not responsive. And so this is a major problem of, well, when I load that on my phone, those images can't realign, right? So in this case, all right, we've got a couple images of these officers, right? And what would we expect to happen on mobile? We would expect that this information wrap down to the next level. But what we're working with here is an older web designer. We're working with a web designer who isn't comfortable in the Flexbox and isn't comfortable with mobile site design, or isn't paid enough to learn those new concepts. Maybe, just guessing. And because of that, we don't have a mobile responsive site. And in fact, if you pull up ongov.net on your phone, you may find that the site is also not responsive. Let me confirm that before I badmouth it. Yeah. So the site is not responsive at all. It just loads in exactly the way that we would expect it to, right? So if we look at the very top part there, those nav links are minuscule. That black little bar, we have to pinch in to figure out what to click on there. So I'm totally fine with doing this. I'm going to give you guys one last chance if you would like to see MySpace. But I will say that this site is probably a little bit more interactive than you think. And I do think that this is a good site to look into how we would go about building something like this. Any last pleas for MySpace over OnGov?
Is it possible to do a poll?
Yeah, good idea.
Let's make them do the new Syracuse website.
Oh, what a shame. I just created a poll. That's not an option on it.
I said the Apple homepage with all the
Believe it or not,
beautiful scrolling and
the Apple homepage isn't too bad. The Apple product pages are
that's what
definitely
it
a lot
was.
more complicated.
That's what it was. What does the iPhone 15 Pro look like? The one where it just moves the objects around and everything as it scrolls.
Could have did the Wayback Machine for the Apple website.
Oh, I just saw that recently.
I did too. It
A
looks
history of
complicated.
the sites.
All right. Poll is, oop, wrong one. poll is launched, so you guys can decide between OnGov and MySpace, now that I've kind of talked through both of them. Maybe I need to go pull up MySpace and bad talk that so you guys can have a... No, just kidding.
I was telling them before you got on that the guy who made this website, he actually still works there, and he is the head of IT. He's also a principal software engineer. I guess he made it like a decade and a half ago, and then screwed off into another position.
And you know what? A decade and a half ago, this was a cutting edge website. You know,
I'm
like
sure.
this was so I hate to badmouth any software engineer, which software engineers love to do. But this is not any fault of him. And I'm not just saying that because, you know, you may know him. It is just a standard of technology, right? And if we aren't constantly moving forward and learning new things, we're falling behind. This is not a state where we can, technology is not one of those things that, you know, it's like calculus. We learn calculus, calculus hasn't changed. Once we learn calculus, we know calculus. Web design is not the same, right? Because 15 years ago, the iPhone wasn't even out. The iPhone may have come out that year when he built this site, right? And so technology just moves forward. And the fact that he only was thinking about the 1% of the population who was loading a website on mobile using BlackBerry was like, of course the site is totally fine. So that is all about technology moving forward and sites not keeping up. And it is nice to see someone like the city updating their site using more modern design. And I'm sure at some point, someone at the county will say, hey, we should actually spend some serious money on this and redo our website, because there are so many of our residents that depend on this for information.
Well, Angel pointed out that the credentials are expired.
Oh yeah, there's no HTTPS. Lovely. Fantastic. Okay.
Oswego's looks beautiful.
All right, so it looks like we have had a change of heart and we are leaning into MySpace. I do not have a MySpace account, so give me 1 second. I am guessing you would like me to do the MySpace user page, not just the MySpace homepage? Or do we
Correct.
want to just see the homepage?
The user page.
I want to see the user page. I want that top 8.
All right, let me
Early 2000s MySpace. Okay.
oh,
I
do you
need-
want
I need 2005 MySpace. That's what we're looking for.
You got to get the music on the page too.
Yeah, I need the music. I need the
All right.
music player
so let's
with the SpongeBob background.
let's, instead of me signing up for an account, let's agree upon what we're looking to recreate. So are we thinking
That's the one right there. You just gotta have a cool background.
we thinking I'm just making
Just
sure
looking.
one
just looking
one of
for-
these has like a top 8.
I'll say I never been through the MySpace era, but just looking at it just
Man,
hurts.
it was a great era. You don't even know.
Nah, I'm gonna stick to my Facebook and Newgrounds.
Good times, good
It
times.
was a good
Yeah.
time.
I
just pulled- I just pulled up my old one.
You don't know the joy of having to get on that page and that player just start playing. It's a favorite song, or the critical friendships that was ended when you move somebody out your top 8. You have no idea.
Used to take days to make.
We could have told them to make AIM, and y'all have no idea what that's like. You had to talk to people when they were
AIM,
online.
Woo, that's going way back. Hold up. He's at
AIM would be
That's
You
crazy.
could only talk to people when they were online. You had to wait for them to sign on to the computer, unless you had a sidekick.
I'm finding a lot of things that are close. Maybe if I put in top 8 in the
Oh yeah,
I'm trying to
And
find
make
one that
top 8.
has the top 8.
Yeah. Make Soldier Boy tell them the song I play on the playlist too. By the way, why was it top 8 and not like top 10? You asking way too many questions.
I think you can
It could
make that
be
many.
no, it could be any. It could just be 4 or 10.
Not at first. At first, it was only top 8. Then they made it to where
Then
you
you
could do
can,
top
yeah, you can
10,
edit it.
top. They
Yeah.
customized it, but when it first came out, it was only top 8.
All right, is this what we're thinking of
I
for
ain't that
classic
old.
MySpace?
Yeah, that's fine.
God,
Yeah.
that looks gross.
We're going for that?
Yeah, that's good right there.
That's
That's
you.
good.
Who's that? Yep.
All right.
That is Kim. Princess Kimberly. Wow, that's crazy.
Make sure that background SpongeBob.
Yeah, you gotta have a SpongeBob background with a bag of money or something. That was like
Yeah,
really
the back
popular.
Yeah, that's the one.
With the grill.
Yeah,
Oh, the
right
one with the
there.
J, yeah.
With the grill. Oh yeah, right there. That's classic.
Oh, that's crazy.
All right. Challenge accepted. Let's dive into it. I am not going to encourage you code along on this because I'm actually going to go at my kind of the speed that I normally develop websites. So I am encouraging you to kind of sit back and relax, at least for the first half of class tonight. And we're going to see how much I can get accomplished on recreating this design here. The one thing I will say is I am going to use modern development tools, right? I am going to use things like the grid, which back all the way back in the day didn't exist. I am going to use Flexbox if it calls for it to create something like this, but I am going to go through kind of component by component, and you're going to see how I would build this site. So buckle in, enjoy the ride. The one thing I will say, though, is don't hesitate to ask me questions. So as I'm going through these items, and if you have any kind of like, why did you do it this way? I would have done it this way. Feel free to interrupt. Feel free to be interactive here. I don't want you to feel that this is that you can't jump in and ask questions. With all of that said, I'm going to start the way that we start everything, which is creating a new folder on the desktop for day 3. Pop that open in VS Code. If my Zoom toolbar were not in the way. I'm sorry, let me make sure I get this out of the way. Let me pop this open in here. Close this out. Do my index.html, do my style.css. Use my exclamation point equals. Say Kim's MySpace. Let's try not to break the internet tonight. We will throw in a style rel link rel style sheet and our href to our style.css. Of course, we are going to pull in Bootstrap because we are getting major grid going on here. So we're going to take advantage of that. Grab that link tag, come over here, paste that in above my style.css. I'm going to go live. I will start a live share in case that is easier for you guys to follow along with the code.
Matt, quick question. How
yes.
do you so quickly get your bootstrap to level out on all those spaces like that?
Prettier.
Prettier? Every time I install mines on Prettier, it doesn't just click out like that. It just gives me one long line.
It should be. Do you have a green check for Prettier after it does it?
No, sir.
Okay. Remind me after class and I can take a look to see if it's not wrapping. I will give you guys an option here. Do we prefer left or right? Let me start a poll for that just so it's even. The only reason why I'm leaning more towards the left option here is it's more of the full site. So you can see how you can see kind of a full site except for outside of snippets. So let me. Okay. prefer to see the left one we created or the right one we created? I will get you SpongeBob either way. No, you cannot just vote for Kim because she's Kim. Okay. Seems like most of you are leaning towards the left one, which I would agree with. I think that that's gonna show you a little bit more of site design from top to bottom. So we're gonna do that one instead. So I'm gonna throw this over here. And I'm going to start everything with a container. So I'm gonna get maybe this is my live server. Let me do a search for like Windows background XP, because I think that that will kind of be nostalgic for us. Now, keep in mind that this is copyrighted, right? So if I were publishing this site on the internet, I wouldn't just go and grab this image. But fortunately, we operate under something called fair use of copyright law for education. So we're allowed to kind of get away with using that. And I'm not selling this. I'm not publishing this. It isn't for commercial use. But I always like to caution that. So I'm going to make my image folder just to keep everything together. I will throw that in there. And then I am going to say, all right, I'm going to work on my div class container. And I'm making it a container because the reference image that we're working with kind of shows that those bars are on the side, right? So if we got to a big enough screen, we wouldn't keep on growing that site out. We would keep it contained. So I am going to, on my container, I'm going to give it this border radius that we're seeing. So I'll say border radius, maybe 10 pixels. And I'm going to throw some margin on the top of it. Let's go for 25 pixels. And spell radius right. And I'm going to throw some content in here of test. And I cannot see anything because that image. Let's get out of here. We've got some backgrounds going on, right? So I'm going to start with my three major components that I see. I kind of see a header. I see a top nav or a regular nav, and then I see the main page content. And so we've been working pretty much exclusively with divs up until this point, except for little things like p tags and spans and all of that. But there's something called semantic HTML, which basically says, hey, instead of calling everything a div, we can call things nav and main and header and all of these other things that make search engines, not only search engines, easier to understand what kind of content you're going to use in this div. It also makes it easier for screen readers. So if you may have a vision impairment, the screen reader can basically, instead of calling everything a div, it can basically describe to you what kind of content is in that section. So I'm going to use those for the first time tonight. I'm actually going to use a header. And I am definitely going to want to use my row grid system for that. I'm going to make my nav links. And that, I think I'm going to just make span tags because it goes across the screen. And then the last thing I'm going to do is my main section. And I'm going to throw I'll just throw placeholders in there for now. So I'll say header, nav, and main. And then I'm also going to target those. So I'm going to say header. And I'm going to use, there is a tool that will allow me to grab the hex code in preview. So if I go into show colors, they've got this eyedropper here that allows me to come over here, click in here. And then under the second tab, they give me the hex code directly. And that's exactly what I want to be working with. So I'm going to grab that and say my background color for this will be that specific color purple. I'm going to come in here and grab my peachish pink and say my nav is going to be the background color that we just grabbed. And then that final one looks like it's white, so we'll leave it as is. Container. Interesting. My background is hanging a little over because I made that a row. Okay. Let's put everything in a column for this because I am technically breaking my rule of putting content inside a row that is not in a column. Get my closing tags right, refresh, and I'm still going to have that problem. All right, we'll make everything a row. So the row is kind of interesting because it does some weird things with margin on the left and right. And sometimes things don't align perfectly. And so because of that, you want to be careful when you intermix rows and columns with your CSS if you're targeting that directly. Let's do down here. Do my call. Move that in. Okay, so I got my basic site layout working. The last thing I want to do, I am gonna target my main as a background color of white. And then I am going to work on getting my background image working. So I'm going to target my body and say my background image. And I like to rename these so they are a little bit easier to reference in our code. So I'll say URL is going to our image windows.webp. And that's a starting point, but I don't like the repeat. So I'm going to do CSS background repeat, go to my W3 schools and see what all of my options are. So the option is no repeat, and that's what I want to use. So I'm going to say background repeat, no repeat. And that is on the right spot, but the problem is it's not stretching. So if I do a search for CSS background stretch, I am going to come down to W3 schools and see that the option is background size 100%, 100%. Let's see if that works, because normally I use the cover property. Nope, that is not doing what I want. Let's look at background size. Background size, my options are cover, contain, and initial. So let's try cover. Background size, cover. That gets it in there. Maybe sized a little differently because it's cropping parts of it. And I do have to solve that problem down here, right? Of, oh, I want this to stretch all the way to the bottom. So let's try and do, I think contain is going to shrink it. Contain. Yeah, it's going to shrink it to just the height of it. So maybe what I need to do is do cover and say my min height should be 100% VH. A little too big. All right, we'll start with that for now. Get the site content in, and then we can always go back and clean up our background. Any questions so far? Mainly everything that we've covered other than the semantic elements, right? Instead of just using divs, we start naming our elements to be more descriptive of the content. We got the grid system in, we did our rows and our columns. Now we can start going in, now that we've got the very basic done, to get the content working. Okay. We will dive into going back to my preview here. We got to work with my container. I thought I put that border radius on it, but I am not seeing that around the corner here. Let's see if I move that to my header, if that makes it easier to apply it. It does, but I only want the border radius in the top left and the top right. So let's see if I put in some additional properties here. All right, on the right track. Let's switch the 0 and the 10. That's got my rounded corner up at the top, and so we are on the right track. The next thing I need is that big logo, and that to me looks like it's roughly maybe a col 3. So I'm going to go grab the MySpace logo. You always want to make sure it's transparent because otherwise you get a white background behind it, and that is less than fun to deal with. So I'm going to drag and drop that into my downloads folder, put it into my images, rename this as logo. And then I am going to go to my header, take out my H1. We said that that was going to be a col 3 to start with. I'm going to grab in my image src img /logo.png. And I'm going to save. It comes in huge. I fix that pretty quickly with a class of image fluid. And now we've got our MySpace logo in. I'm going to head back to the design. It looks like we've got maybe a col 2 gap there. And then we've got this search user section that we got to target. So I'll do, maybe we'll try it with a col 1 as a spacer. When I use a spacer, I like to put a comment in there that it is a spacer because otherwise you're looking at your code and you're going, what's this col 1? What's supposed to be in there? And then let's make this maybe a col 6. We'll see where we end up spacing wise. And then it's got the text search users, the input, and the search. So I'm going to try that all as inline elements. I'm going to do a span that says search users. I'm going to do an input with a type of text, and I'm going to do a button with the word search in it. And we'll see how that comes out. I'm going to expand this out a little bit. We're on the right track. The first thing I noticed right off the bat is that my design has more padding right at the top of it, and we probably want that as well. And it looks like that padding applies not only to this section, this column, but also the help and the log out. So because of that, I'm going to change where I'm targeting my CSS. I'm going to make that apply to the entire header, and I'm going to say padding top, let's try 20 pixels. Okay, on the right track. To finish this one out, I notice my font is different, and we'll try and be as matching here as possible. So capital U, and then I'm gonna say in my, looks like my entire page is actually in Courier. So I'm gonna go to my body and say the font family, because this is classic web design, I can say Courier, Courier New, and monospace. If we were doing any other font that was not web safe, we'd have to go to Google Fonts, grab that link tag, go through everything that we did yesterday. But because these are all web safe fonts, I'm not going to have to do that. So I'm going to come over here. Everything's looking pretty good there. Maybe I got slightly less of a border on that search button. That border looks like it's a little too heavy for me. So I am going to say ID search, and then come down to my CSS, add in my search, target just the button in it, and then maybe drop my border width down to 1 pixel. Looking pretty good. I'm happy with this compared to this so far. The last thing I need to do is change my text color. So I will say the entire header section should have a color of white text. That changes that there. And I think I'm pretty happy with how that's going so far. One thing to note that this MySpace logo has a lot of room above it and below it. And we didn't really control that. And we can't really control that in our CSS. The reason that it is like that is because if I open this in preview, which we've had a taste of, you can actually see all of this space up here is causing the issue. So oftentimes we can't fix images in our code directly beyond things like border radius. Instead, we actually have to do a little bit of image editing as a developer. So I'm going to come down here, kind of space this out a little bit better and hit Command K. Command K is a built-in crop function in preview. And then I can go ahead and save this. And when I come back over and refresh my page, that's what gets some of that transparent pixels that are not sizing it right. And now it looks like it's a little uncentered because I do have some padding on the top of my header. So let's throw some padding on the bottom of my header of 20 pixels and 15 maybe. And now that's looking pretty even to me. Pausing there for questions. Okay, let's finish out the header. I'm going to go back over to my source image, which of course I closed. And the last thing we have is our help and our logout. So I will target that in my div class. I'm just going to do a call, so it takes up the remaining space. And I will do a text end on that as well. So it goes over to the right. We will do a span that says help with a vertical bar between it, and then another span that says log out. We'll save that, take a peek of what that looks like in the browser. We get our help and our log out, and we have completed the header. Okay. Guessing things will get more exciting when we get down into the main section, but let's knock out that nav links really quickly. So the nav links, just white text with those vertical bars in between them. And it does look like we actually have, is that a little emoji there? Looks like a little emoji. Back in the day, we wouldn't have that available to us, but because we get to cheat here a little bit, I can use a little emoji for that. So I'm going to throw my emoji in of the bell. And then I am going to separate all of these out with span tags. So this is kind of interesting. I'm going to say, all right, I will do my first span. And it's home, browse, and search. I'm going to say home. I want to make sure I get my spacing right here. Browse. Search, and we'll do one more. Messages. And we have that showing up. The only problem is in our mockup, the links are in white and then the separator bars are in black. So what I can do on that is I can target my my nav and I can say the color of the text should be black. But if that text is inside a span inside my nav, make the color white. So I save that, I come over here, I've got my everything showing up, so that final bar that I was missing. And now we've got our nav rocking and rolling. Maybe we'll throw maybe a little bit of padding, not much though, on the top of 5 pixels and on the bottom of 5 pixels. Give that a little bit more breathing room. Feeling pretty good about that. And, you know, while we're here, let's add in a class on these of link so that we can style them. Classes, again, because I want to reuse this in multiple places. normally we would use A tags, but A tags have some requirements around actually specifying an href for them. And because we're not actually making those links go anywhere, we want to be careful about using those anchor tags directly. So instead, I'm going to use a span tag. I'll use my link, and I'll say when you hover over that link, maybe put a text decoration of underline on them and change the cursor to a pointer. So now when we underline or when we hover over them, we get that classic underline effect that we are used to on sites. All right. Third of this, or 2/3 of the site technically done. Now for the hardest section, that main section. So hopefully all of these techniques are things where you're like, oh, you know what? We have done emojis, and oh, this is the grid system again, right? Just being able to lay all of that content out. Little tips and tricks that we may run into. Cropping images is new, semantic elements are new, but hopefully this is all showing you, hey, you can really create almost any website using the techniques that we have already learned. All right. First thing that screams out to me is 2 columns, right? And we may need nested columns in here like we do in this section, but for the most part, all of this main section, 2 major columns. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to start with my col, and I'm going to size it. So I'll say that looks like a 4. That looks like it's taking up roughly 25%, and this is taking up another 75%. So I'll throw a col 8 on there. And you know what? Let's try and get responsive. So I'll say left col, and I'll say, right col. And if I don't specify a size, when I get really small, it's going to keep everything in left and right. But I can get responsive here with this. I can say, hey, if we're on a medium-sized screen, make it a 4. But if we're on a smaller screen, an SM, make it take up the full width. And we're going to do that same thing here for this column. And now you'll see left col, right col are right on top of each other until I expand this out, and then they will stack left and right. Okay, keep on going here. We got the user's name, and then some edit photos options and the profile. So we will say, let's make that maybe an H3 element. We will say my name. And then we've got some links underneath it. So we'll do a div there. And we'll put those in a span. Actually, we'll do the brackets outside of that. And then say edit name. And just a space between them and more brackets with I want to be all inside my div here. Edit photo. In a span. We'll call everything in this div maybe edit links. We can target our edit links and target the span specifically and make them all a color of the pink that we were using before.
You put the bracket or the span inside the bracket on the end of the edit photo.
No, I want them outside. So only the if we look at the design, the brackets stay in black and the links stay in that pink. So that is intentional. Although I am missing a space or had an extra space there. And we can even apply our class of link to these, which we already have defined. And the kind of cool thing about doing that is that we can reuse the hover and pointer options to make those both links. All right, I've got some padding going on. Looks like that is the padding on the left doesn't look bad. It's just the padding right on the top. So I'm going to target my main section and add padding on the top of 20 pixels. And then this looks like it's in bold. So I'll target my main H3 and make a font weight on that of bold. And we are off to a pretty good start. All right, how much more do you think I can get done in 17 minutes? 18 minutes. I can do math. All right. Got our username in place. We've got our font weight. That padding is going to bother me if it's not also on the bottom. So we'll throw that in there before I forget. Now we've got to tackle our image. So our image, I'm going to just make that a full circle. I can't remember if all of the MySpace images were cropped off at the bottom there, but we're going to pretend it's a full circle. And I'm not going to tackle these edit and onlines because they're just wrapping around. I think it will be more helpful to see other sections of the site as we work on it. So I will grab, I will use maybe SpongeBob as, oh, I'll use Mr. Krabs. So I will grab Mr. Krabs. I am going to crop him to be a square to make it a little bit easier. I'll crop that, save. Go to my files, drop Mr. Krabs in. Rename Mr. Krabs. Figure out where I want to be. So I need to be outside of my edit links. So I will make a div there. Do my image source as img Krabs PNG. I will put a ID on this of profile image. I will target my profile image. And we've got some options here. I could put Mr. Krabs in a column and shrink Mr. Krabs down to a col 6, right? And that would make it easier to get this text showing up on the right of it. But because I already said, all right, I'm going to just skip these two. If I really wanted these two to work, I could put them up there. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just target the width on that directly. So I'm going to say, hey, go to my profile image section, target the image inside of it, and set a width to 50% of the column. So I come back over here, refresh, and now Mr. Krabs is taken up 50%. That wasn't a transparent image. I could do my border radius on that, set that to a high amount. That would get the circle going on, and I would be good to go on that section. Feeling good so far? Any questions? Okay. I'm going to skip these because we've already seen that working out. I am going to jump down to this contacting section because I think that that will be a good one to work through. And then after break, we can tackle something like the top 8 section down here and make something like that show up. Okay. I'm going to get this contacting section work next. So I need to make sure that I am inside of my col 4. I am now getting into my div soup. So I'm going to say this is the end of profile column. Just so that I can keep track of that. So I will make my div. And I will put a, maybe that looks like an H3 inside of it that says contacting Max Matthews. Take a look at my browser. That looks a little too big. So let's go all the way down to an H6 on that. That looks good. We'll work with that. Maybe an H5, make it a little bit bigger. Yeah. So I will say this is all within, I'm gonna add an ID onto this. Austin, question. You are on mute if you're talking to us.
Real quick, I just noticed you didn't change the closing tag for those. Like it still says
Oh,
like
yes.
closing each, and it still worked. So is that a
Yeah, that's something that the browser's doing as a courtesy to us, but we
Okay.
really should update them. And in fact, the text editor I use at work, when you update the opening tag, it does update the closing tag.
Okay.
It's something I wish VS Code did, but thank you for catching that. Okay, profile. We'll target our profile column. And now we can use nested CSS. So I can say target the H5, make the H5 a font weight of bold, which is good. And then I will add a border bottom to that of 1px solid black. I'm guessing it's actually probably closer to 2. That gets me running my border all the way across, feeling pretty good about that. Now, if this were an inline element, if I made this a span, we would run into a different issue. Yes, I did the same typo twice. You'll notice that if I try and target my span here, the border will only go to the width of the text. And I don't really want it to go to the width of the text. I want it to go to the full width of the element. And so when I use that H5 here, an H5, just like a div, is a block element, meaning that by default, it will span the full width of the column. So often when you're working with borders, you got to be careful because if it's an inline element, it's only going to take up the space of the text compared to a block element like a div or an H5 that will automatically default to a width 100. You can change a span element to a block element, just like you can change a div to an inline element. But oftentimes it's better to just identify what kind of element is the best one to use here. Okay, now we've got a bunch of different things to work with here. Now, if you didn't want to work with emojis, you definitely could go out on the internet and either find these specific images as long as they were copyright approved, or you could go to Google Fonts and find those icons that you're looking for. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get all of these from my emojis. Plus, emojis sometimes look a little childish in website design, right? We're so used to seeing them in message content that we want to kind of see different icons. So let's go ahead and practice with our Google Fonts. Before I dive into that, though, the first thing that I notice is 2 columns. So I want to get my 2 columns out of the way to get this working. So I'm going to come down to my contacting Max Matthews. I'll do my div class row because I can't use columns without putting them in a row first. And then I need 2 calls to put all of those links in. And it's add to friends, send message. And I'm just going to do 2 of them each. So let's do these as a div with a add to friends. Send message, and then add to favorites and maybe block user. Now, I'm noticing all of these are in that pinkish color, right? So instead of applying a class at this level or even at the column, I'm going to do that all the way up at my row. I'm going to say, hey, this is the contact links. And then everything inside those contact links can be a color. And I just got to go back up and grab that pink. Use that down here. Okay. So now I've got all of those links showing up. I now need to get those icons working. So I'm going to go Google Material Icons. I am going to make sure I go to, let's see, the first one is a plus. So I will find my plus icon, grab this one, make sure I go down to my static icon font, copy that, head back up to my index, my head, copy and paste that in. Head back over to the span tag, copy that, figure out where I want that to go, which is in this add to friends, paste that in. And I'll grab my message while I'm in here. Grab the span tag. Throw that in my send message. We'll do a search for favorite. Use the heart for that. Doing this off the cuff. I don't know if the design might be a little different. And then we'll do a search for block. Grab that and use that span. The benefit of using span tags over images is that it will match the font color that we want. And then the other thing that we did to fix this, I think if we did a class D inline flex, I believe that gets our text looking more like we want. So let's just quickly flex these so that the icons line up with the label. Okay, feeling pretty good about those. I don't love the contrast of this, that this is a little too light on the text. There are actually some requirements for accessibility for contrast, where the difference in the color between the background and the text color needs to be a certain like percentage difference. And oftentimes if we go into inspect, it will actually show you that. I'm trying to remember where it does in the dev tools. Maybe into accessibility. Oh, you know what it is? If you hover over this. I'm blanking on where that is. Anyway, there is a
score or something like that.
What is it?
Lighthouse score.
Lighthouse is usually for like performance of how quickly it loads in, I thought.
All right.
I'm blanking on where it is. Anyway, there is a way in Chrome and some of the other browsers for it to basically go through and flag your color selections and tell you that there isn't enough contrast between whatever background you're using it on, and whatever color you selected for that font. I really thought it was right in here, but I guess I'm wrong on that. Anyway, we're making good progress. I've got my contacting section working. I've got everything laying out here kind of the way that I want. Before we go on break, go ahead and head to attendance. The secret word for tonight is MySpace. How are we feeling? Is this helpful to see how the site is built? How are we feeling in general? You feeling pretty bored? You want to see the right side of this? Do we want to, where are we
It's
at?
pretty interesting seeing you recreate it, and it's seeing the work going into it is also appeasing.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
But it's
I
just
do got
like,
a question though.
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh my bad. I don't know if I missed it. I was in your CSS and I see that you had your nav and your nav span and your main to
Mhm.
like change the background and colors, but I don't see that in your HTML, like the words nav and I know you use it as a filler at first, but
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So up here, we've got the main and the nav.
oh, did I just miss it?
And so
Oh.
we can target those, we call those semantic HTML elements, where they're semantic because they're describing the content that is inside of them. So
Yeah.
just like we can target the body without having to add a class body onto it, we can target those elements without having to add a space or a class or an ID.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Joe.
So you mentioned accessibility with colors. How important is it in like this day and age when most devices have like device level accessibility features? For you to like be thinking about things like color, like because like if I go into my settings right now on my phone or my laptop, I can switch everything over to a different color scheme if I'm like colorblind.
Yeah, so it depends on accessibility is certainly important. And unfortunately, the real answer is because there was a lawsuit over that, right? And so basically a company got sued and they were like, well, we don't really care if our website's accessible or not. If we lose a customer, so be it. And there was a lawsuit that basically came out that said, well, if you make your building ADA compliant, you also have to make your website ADA compliant, kind of. Not those specific words, but so accessibility is important, especially on larger websites, because you never know what the person's disability may be. The problem may not be color blindness. It may be that they are blind to the point where they can only see a specific spot, right? Or they may have a disability where it's not that they can't see color, but because things are blurry, and they can't get, corrective vision to 20/20, the additional contrast is what allows them to be able to read things easier. And so there are all kinds of different disabilities where we want to make it as easy, not only on the person to be able to read the site without any accessibility tools, but also make it easier on the accessibility tools to be able to convey the information on the website. So there are all kinds of compliance rules. I work with them all the time at work, and I'm blanking on the biggest standard. That basically is a long list of all of the things that you should do, from contrast to text size to background images to alt tags to semantic HTML elements to all kinds of stuff, right? That make your design and your content more accessible.
Yeah, I know that I probably could have asked the question a little bit better. What is there a point of like if I switch the colors to be more accessible on like the actual website,
Yeah.
like the front end of the website, does that fight with like the devices accessibility tools, or is it like aware that I guess I don't know how the devices tools work. Is it going to like
Yeah.
turn the contrast up?
So the OS will always overwrite, the OS or the browser will always overwrite whatever styling decisions we make. So if you turn on high contrast mode, the browser is basically going to use an algorithm to change the color while still being as true to the design that we picked as possible. So it may not make it a light pink, it might make it a dark pink, but it's still going to keep it pink. Unless the user goes in and goes, I want everything in black and white, which is also, or grayscale, more accurate. And at which point it goes, all right, that's what the user requested, so that's what we're going to show you. So the accessibility tools will always override whatever design we picked while still trying to be as true to it as possible.
I see. I didn't know if it was like a blanket, like we're going to turn up like the red value on all of your colors on your website or something like that.
Yeah, like I said, it tries to use an algorithm where it won't override every color, but it will still try to be true to what we picked.
Gotcha.
Okay, we are at break time. before we go on break, it's a good habit to look at this and be like, you know, for an hour's work, this is actually pretty good. We've made good progress. We don't have everything done, but we do have the basic site layout working. We've got fonts and colors matching. We've got some harder sections like the links with icons all showing up. When we come back, we will tackle the friend section. We'll tackle things like edit your profile. And then at the end of class, I will let you guys decide are there any sections that we would like to add here? Is there something that we would like to maybe try and make a little bit more interactive? We will go from there. So go on break. I'll give you guys a couple extra minutes tonight. Go on break. Be back at 7:30. All right. So I'm actually going to give you guys the option of how we want to spend the second half of class. So the two options are we can keep coding this out. We can finish out the content section, which will be, I think, mostly more of the same. What do I have on my face? Just lighting?
No, it's like up on
No,
your
it's in your
dash.
beard. Yeah, it's in your mustache. On your chin.
You got it, I think.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Chipotle for dinner, so probably some sour cream. Thank you for letting me know. Otherwise, I'll be watching this recording back going, damn, why didn't someone tell me about that? We've got two options. We can either keep working on the site. You can keep seeing how I will finish out the content section, and then you guys can throw out any ideas of like, hey, I've always wondered how you would make this design, right? And we can put that in. Or you guys have the option of getting it done and over with and getting the pop quiz done. If we don't do the pop quiz tonight, the pop quiz will be coming tomorrow, so it is unavoidable either way. But the pop quiz is basically to do what I'm doing right now in reverse, right? So go out, find a section of a website. I'm not asking you to create the whole thing. I'm not asking you to get anything near done what we were able to get done in the past hour, but the idea is, and again, if we don't do it tonight, we'll spend an hour on it tomorrow night. And it's just for you to go out, pick a website that or a section of a website that you've always found interesting and try and recreate it on your own. And we only work on it for about an hour. You have the opportunity at any point to go, I'm trying to get this work in, raise your hand and we can share your screen and work through it. So I will give you guys the option in a poll. Let me get it set up. All right, that is launched. And so you guys can pick, where do we head for the second half of class?
So like the remake of the site, like are we like do we have like the pick like any website, or is it just
You can pick any website or any section of any website. So you don't need to recreate the entire Google search results page. You could make just the top half work, right, with the search input. Or you could say, I don't want to make that work. I'm just going to do the search results and I'm going to make that work. So for the pop quiz assignment, you basically take a screenshot of what you're trying to recreate and submit that with your own HTML and CSS.
okay, just checking.
Most of you have voted in 68%, 68% to be exact. All right, final call. All right, you've all voted. Thank you. Looks like you are kicking the can to another day. So no pop quiz tonight, but you do have that pop quiz coming tomorrow. So that is your homework assignment. Knowing that that's coming up, feel free to think about that. Let that marinate over the next 24 hours or so of what site you would like to create. But you're off the hook for tonight. We will keep on working on the MySpace site for now. All right, let's dive back in. All right, So we are going to put down this left side of the site because I think we've already kind of gone through the hard parts of it, and we're going to jump over to the content section. So I'm going to do this edit your profile. I'll do there are no blog entries yet. Maybe I'll skip this blurb section and then we'll get the friend section working. We'll try and get some SpongeBob in here, and then we will open it up to you guys to decide where you would like to head from there. All right, let's start with the edit your profile. I am going to figure out where we're at. We're starting with this right column. So I'm going to take this out and I'm going to do a div. And come on, I can type. We will call this ID edit profile, and the text that goes inside of it says edit your profile. And you know what? This is now about the 10th time that we have gone in and had to scroll up and find this specific pink color, right? Wouldn't it be nice if we could use something called a variable meaning what we use in math, right? Don't worry, I'm not going to make you do any math tonight. But the general notion of, can we name something pink? Think about it, naming it X, and then we can use X in several different places. So in order to do that, if we do a search for CSS variables and head over to W3 schools, it shows us, hey, this is a color that we use in a bunch of different places, right? But if we come down here, we can define what blue is and then use that blue in a bunch of different places. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm going to say in the root, which is basically saying apply it to the entire CSS document, I am going to define what my pink is. My pink is going to be this color right here. And now, whenever I would like to use that pink, I can come down to my edit profile and say I would like the color of that text to be a var called pink. And by doing that, if it works, we get our edit your profile showing up in pink. Now, I did want to mention, someone found in the chat where the contrast was. I was not crazy. If you go into the inspect here and hover over something like search users, you can see that contrast under accessibility, and it's got the an exclamation point on it, right? That's saying that the purple is not dark enough or the white is not light enough for a contrast there. Now, in this design, that is a fault of the designer. So you could either go back to the designer and say, can you make that a darker color, purple, or you could do it yourself. The reason why I couldn't find that before is it doesn't show up everywhere in Chrome. So in Chrome, this is really easy because it knows the background color of the div that it is on. When we come down to something like edit your profile, it does show that contrast. But when I was hovering over the links here, it just disappears. For whatever reason, Chrome could not figure out what the background color was. And so it didn't provide me the contrast info that I was looking for. So Tiffany did post a link, and we're actually going to use coolers a little down the road. So we'll use coolers when we're doing our own designs to generate a color palette. I think we actually do it in the portfolio website coming up. So that contrast can be very helpful, but Chrome doesn't always show it to you. So it's not something that you should rely on, but it is something helpful to check to make sure that your website text is the easiest to read as possible. Okay, edit your profile. This is what we are shooting for. We are shooting for it in a black box with some space around it. So we are going to say the edit profile is going to get a border. Let's say 5px solid black. That will get our box showing up. Now we need to, that font weight is driving me crazy. So I'm going to make that bold. Fixes that. And now we will throw some padding because we want it to be inside the border on the top of, let's say, 30 pixels and on the bottom of 30 pixels. Okay. And then it may be tempting to throw some left padding on this to get it positioned right. The reason why we don't want to do that is if I expand this out, the width of that box is going to change, especially when we get into more responsiveness and it wraps down to the bottom. So the much better solution here is to do one of two things. We could either go to our CSS and throw a text align center onto this div, or we could use our CSS, or I'm sorry, our Bootstrap, and say text center on that, and that would also align it into the center. Okay, feeling pretty good about that. We've got our edit, your profile working. Now I'm gonna jump down. I think the blurb section should be pretty easy to build out. So I'm gonna jump down into this friend space section that looks like a little bit more fun to build. So I'm going to figure out where I'm at. I want to be inside my col 8, but outside of my edit profile. If I was inside my edit profile, I would be inside this border box, and that's not where I want to be. So I'm going to jump down to my friend space section inside my col MD8. I'm going to do an ID of friends space. I will throw I think we did an H5 here. Just to keep it consistent, we'll double check. H5, yeah. So we'll say Max Matthews friend space. I will target my H5. And because we already targeted this H5 here with the font weight and the bottom border, I'm also going to do that for my friend space up here. So I'm going to just reuse that selector or that styling and apply it to another selector. I am noticing that I want a little bit of space there. I could put space at the bottom of the profile, but I think the contacting Max Matthews could also benefit with a little bit of space between those two sections. So I'm going to throw a margin top on both of those of, let's say, 25 pixels. Okay, liking that, applying to both of them. I'm going to go back to my design for reference. It's going to say I have 2 friends. So we will do that. We'll do a p tag for that and say Max Matthews has 8 friends. And this styling in here is looks like that is a red color. So of course, we could use our friend space, target the span, do the styling down here, but a reminder that you can always do inline styling. Inline styling usually isn't preferred because we like to move our CSS down into a separate file so we have separation of style and content. But as a reminder, I'm just going to do it in place here. And that CSS applies exactly the same. So you still have your property of color. You still have the value of that property. We do have to make sure that they're in quotes. And then if you had multiple properties, you would want to separate them with those semicolons. Let's take a look at what that looks like. That is in there. That looks good to go. So I'm going to continue on. It's actually indented a little bit. I could put a little bit of padding on the left of that to get it in. I don't like it indented though, so I'm going to leave it as is. And now I'm going to tackle these profile icons here. Before I do, I'm going to take a look at Bootstrap to see if they have a profile icon pre-built. We're going to get into Bootstrap components tomorrow. No, they don't. Okay, so I'll build it from scratch. All right, so the name appears on the top and then the image appears beneath it. And it looks like we've got room for maybe 4 friends across. So immediately my brain goes to the grid system. Whenever I've got items positioned across the screen, I want to think about the grid. So I'm going to start with a outside my p tag, still in my friend space. I'm going to do a div class row. Each one of them will be a col 3 because I want 4 across. 3 times 4 is 12. I do want to text center because I want the profile name to show above it. And I will say Tom is definitely one of my friends on MySpace. I will go get a picture of Tom from MySpace. I will throw Tom inside my image folder. And then I've got to get Tom's image showing upright. So I'm going to do img src, go to my image folder. I'm going to rename Tom. I will throw a tom.webp in here. In case you haven't heard of WebP before, it's just a compressed image format. It makes images smaller than JPEGs or PNGs do. We don't typically use it a lot for photos, but when we publish things to the internet, we use WebP now to compress images to a even smaller image size. Okay, now I am going to throw my class on here of image fluid. That will shrink Tom down. And then finally, I am going to say in my friend space, target any image. And this is kind of interesting because even though my friend space is all the way up here, CSS will cascade down that selector. So any image anywhere inside of this div will be picked up from that IMG. If I wanted to modify my CSS selector and say only apply to images directly that are a child of the friend space, I can use this caret here. But without the caret, it's saying apply it to images anywhere within that div. The caret is saying just to the children, not to the grandchildren or any other level down. So I'm going to say friend space image, and then I will say throw a border radius on that of, let's say, 1,000 pixels. We want to basically say the biggest radius possible. That has now shrunk Tom into the circle that I am looking for. And if I take a peek, that is pretty close to the design. I am noticing that that friend's name is in a different font color. So I will target my anything that is inside my friend space col 3 and make that a color of gray. Feeling pretty good about that. I can, of course, replicate that out. So I can take my entire col 3, duplicate it. I will go grab Kim Kardashian because that's where we were. We'll throw her into our image folder. Rename her. Swap Tom out for Kim. And also change Tom's name to Kim. And just like that, we have Kim displayed as an image. All right, let's go back to the design. I'm feeling pretty good about all of this. Obviously, we didn't tackle the whole site, but I'm going to pause here and open it up to you guys. So feel free to either throw it in the chat or come off mute. Do you guys have any ideas or any designs? Oh, I forgot SpongeBob.
Do the falling letters too, like the Matrix.
We'll do falling letters and we'll do ants, SpongeBob, and falling letters. Just to throw some real style onto this, throw it way back. Throw this up on my portfolio site and people are going to be like, I'm definitely not hiring him. He's never made a website in anything modern. All right, let's throw SpongeBob on the background here. So SpongeBob won't look quite right if I change the background color of the header or the nav. So I only want SpongeBob to show up on the my profile section of the site. We did all of that inside of not just the container, we called it all in the main. So I'm going to see if I already have a main that I'm targeting, and I do. So generally in CSS, if you already have a selector, it's better to reuse that selector. If I made another selector called main, it would still work in the CSS. It's not like class where I can't have two classes on the same I can't have two class equals on the same HTML tag. So in this main section, I'm going to just reuse it, but in CSS, you could make another main selector and it would work. So I'll do my background image. We have to specify that it is a URL, and the URL is still in the IMG folder. And I thought I grabbed SpongeBob. Did I not? I just didn't put him in my image folder. All right, and now I will say SpongeBob.jpg. Make sure I spell his name right. And now we've got SpongeBob in our background. Now, obviously, that is not great for contrast reasons and something that we need to keep in mind there. So maybe I will modify SpongeBob. Let's try and put SpongeBob on maybe just the left column there. So I'm going to take my background image out and target my profile instead. Looks like I don't have a selector for just that, so I'll say profile, drop my background image back in there. I can adjust it for a background size of contain. Feeling a little bit better about that. And then maybe I will change my profile font color to white, just so we can read that text. Maybe not classic MySpace, but at least that doesn't completely ruin the design while still having it in there. And it is a throwback to MySpace, right, where we started fiddling around with HTML for the first time. The way we may have done that in the past is just putting an image tag in, but the background image is a better approach for it because the background image will scale based off of the sizing of that column. So if I make that column bigger, we still see SpongeBob is properly sized. Okay. We said border of the ants, which is kind of classic. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you will see in a second. This is actually depreciated. Oh, interesting. I thought there was a way. So we could do. Oh, there was an easy way. Never mind. Maybe ants are not as easy to do anymore as I thought. So old school, we can say, let's see, edit your profile. This is old school, but we can use these blink tags. These are no longer supported, so we would actually want to do oh no, wow, even Chrome won't support that anymore. Okay, never mind. Maybe old school is a little too old school for us. So Joe, you're asking for parallax, which is probably out of the scope of intro HTML. Parallax is the whole notion of when you scroll down the page, things move at different rates. There are some really cool sites for animations. There's one for like the depth of the ocean, and as you scroll down, the content kind of changes. For some of that we can do with CSS. There's also other parts of that we want to unlock with our JavaScript as well. And so Parallax is something that I don't unfortunately have a ton of experience with, so I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that off the cuff. What I will show you guys though is there is a really cool library called animate.css. So you can basically animate different text in. So I will show you how this works. We can take this link tag to install it, just like we do for our Bootstrap. And I'm going to paste that in before my style.css. And then you can see there are all of these classes that you can use. So I'll come up and I'll go for something like tada. And then for my friends, I can add a class on here of animate tada. And then when I nothing is working for me tonight. I might have to put in animate animated and animate tada.
Did you put the link in?
Yeah, I did. So now when I refresh, I get that little wiggle going on. We can accomplish that with just native CSS with something called keyframes. However, that animate CSS is just a nice little way to add in some style. I'm going to look up the raining text to see if there's an easy way to do that with modern HTML and CSS. It doesn't look like there is. That was oftentimes accomplished with a GIF, which of course that still does work, but raining text is a bit harder to accomplish. I'm just seeing if there's anything that jumps out at me. No, there is not. We could try something like maybe a marquee element. Get a little scrolling text going on there. Okay, other ideas.
Gotta add music.
Add music. Oh, I
Yeah,
love
the
it.
music player.
All right. Music player, the good news is has gotten a lot easier now that HTML5 supports it right out of the box. We could do some additional styling with it if we wanted to get into Bootstrap or into JavaScript, but I'll show you the out of the box one. So first we got to go get an MP3 file. No, I don't normally listen to Mozart, but I think he's going to be copyright free, so that's why I'm going for Mozart before any of you judge me. Let me try and find
There's nothing wrong with Mozart.
Okay, I searched for Mozart and I got Bach, so apparently we're getting Bach. It's a sign. I will throw that in. Sometimes we don't call our folder image, we call it assets or static, because we might want to put more into it than just images, but for this, it doesn't really matter. So I will rename this to Bach. And then this is definitely something I always look up every time I need to reference it. So you put in the audio tag. This is a really easy one to forget. If you don't put in controls, it doesn't actually display the player. And then sometimes it will start playing music and you can't actually pause it or change the volume or do anything with it. So the controls is really important here. And then this is just like the fonts, how sometimes you need to use multiple font files. This is if you have different encodings. However, almost every browser supports MP3 these days. The only reason why you would want to use something like OGG is because it is a better compression algorithm. So just like we can use WebP to make images smaller, you could encode the file using a different file format, and that would be less bandwidth. That would make the file load a little quicker. So I'm going to copy this. I will put it in. I think it's got to go in kind of over on the left, right? Let's put it maybe between my profile image and contacting. So I'll drop that in. I'm going to take out this OGG because we don't have it encoded like that. I will drop in my bach.mp3. Go ahead and save that. I'm going to come over to my page. Now it displays. It's kind of hanging over there, right? So maybe it would be better to move it. I'll grab that audio. I'm going to move it down to underneath my edit your profile.
If you were to use the OGG, would it be incompatible for some people or web browsers?
It will, but it will use a fallback. So it basically goes in order where it would use the OGG, and if the OGG didn't work, it would go down to the MP3. It wouldn't show both of them. It just does a fallback. And the site that you can check that with is Can I Use? So if you
Oh,
do
cool.
a search for audio, it will show you what one, if it supports audio at all, and you can see it's supported all the way back to Internet Explorer 9. So that's a pretty good sign. It will also show you that 98% of the people using the internet, their browsers will support an audio element. And then when you come down here, you'll see something like FLAC is supported 97.38. ACC is pretty AAC is pretty widely supported, and then something like OGG is only supported 83% of the time. And so this will give you a really good breakdown showing you that it's not supported in Internet Explorer 11, and that is only used by 0.5% of the entire internet. And then there's some interesting things like Safari on iOS. They will show you that it's not supported on iOS all the way up to 17.3, which is the second newest version. And then if you hover over this, it will show you that it supports the codec, but not the container. I have no idea what that means. But anyway, you can get a better idea here of, if you're allowed to widely use it or not. So Can I Use is a really great website for that.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to come back here. I am going to, let's see if I can cheat and do a text center on this. I don't know if audio elements are block or text. Hopefully they're, yep, cool. Let's throw maybe a little styling on this. Oh, you know what? I can just target the audio player directly, so I'll do that. Audio, throw some margin on the top of 10, some margin on the bottom of 10. And then finally, we can hit play. And to really annoy people, I believe you can put an autoplay in. And then whenever you refresh the page, yeah, so browsers have gotten a little smart to this. Some of them make you interact with the page or click on a link before the autoplay starts, out of annoyance of like ads that are playing audio. So a lot of browsers have started blocking the autoplay attribute. I wonder if Can I Use has notes on that. If they don't, No, they don't in here. Autoplay MDN. Yeah, so MDN has a full section on autoplay blocking, where they will basically say browsers really discourage you from using autoplay unless it's very used intentionally, or they've interacted with the site before you start that autoplay. So there are some properties that are browser specific in here. So I'll leave that in as a comment. All right, what else?
I have no other thoughts. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I'm not too familiar with
It doesn't have to be
MySpace.
MySpace in particular. So if there's something that like you're interested in, you can send a screenshot in the Zoom chat and we can basically find a way to shoehorn it into this page, even though it might not be specific. But hopefully this gives you a good idea of how quickly we can build a page like this.
I have a question how you got the pictures circular. Was that the 1000 pixel?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So border radius, you can kind of hack it. And when you put the radius to above what the width of the image is, it stops the curve at a complete circle.
Okay. Thanks.
I wish you could do like border radius 100%. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. So the hack is to just make it some crazy high number.
I do just have two comments
Yeah.
that have kind of arose in the past couple of hours. So the first one being, you mentioned using another text editor that essentially allows for automatic tag changes. And so there's actually an extension on VS Code. I don't know if you're familiar.
No, although as soon as I said it, I thought, I bet there's an extension for
Yeah.
that. What's
Yeah.
the name?
Yeah, so it's called auto rename tags. So it just very easily essentially lets you edit the back. Well, it automatically edits the back end of the tag as you edit the front end of it. And additionally, just after writing div or any nav or quite literally anything, it'll just write an automatic closing tag for you. So it's super easy. Again, it's called auto rename tag. So an extension found in the extension store within VS Code. And the
And then
second,
just to hold that thought for 1 second, just to visualize that so everyone else can see. I have that installed now. So now if I'm like, oh, I don't want this to be a div, I want this to be an H5, you'll see that the closing tag automatically updates. So that is a really great extension. Thank you for calling that out.
and similarly, the other component is that if you were to create another div right below it, it'll create a corresponding end tag.
It does that by default without the extension.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And then the second comment being in relation to Bootstrap icon, I was kind of tinkering with it last night after, I don't know, just after having some time. And so the Bootstrap icon, the link can be found on the Bootstrap website, but I just find it easier because it essentially defaults to a inline centering kind of flexbox thing. And so you don't necessarily have to put that in within the class itself. But the only downside is that it's an I tag as opposed to a span tag. So I don't know. I have kind of found difficulty in trying to like plan ahead for that while using icons. But yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so I've always used Font Awesome. That was kind of like I don't want to say they were the pioneers, but they were one of the first ones to realize that it was easier to use icons as a font than it was to use them as images. And it goes to exactly what you were saying is oftentimes we want to use an icon as an inline element. And when we do it as an image, we've got to get into all of this sizing and resolution and all of this stuff when we're like, but an icon should really be a vector. And if you guys have never heard of the difference between a vector is basically geometry, right? It's all of the lines and the fills. And the benefit of a vector image is that you can scale it up to whatever size that you need, and it will never get blurry compared to what we call a rasterized or pixelated image, where everything is based off of a pixel. So if we take that image and blow it up to billboard size, you know, we would see the blurriness in it that we are used to. And so the benefit of these icons is because they are all vector images, and because I believe almost all fonts are also vector based, we are able to scale up those icons and never run into any issues. That is often why that when you're building a site for a client, you'll want to ask the client for a vector of their logo. And Joe, this goes back kind of to what you were saying with the should I use REMs? Vectors are much better to use because on a HD monitor, you may not notice that the logo is a little blurry. But if you load that site on your phone, you'll start to see a little bit more blurriness come on, or your Mac, which is, you know, much higher resolution than an HD monitor that we may be used to working with. So vector images are a really great thing, and I'm glad you threw out Bootstrap icons, because you can use Google Material icons, you can use the Bootstrap icons, you can also use Font Awesome, which is the icon library that I am totally used to using. There are lots of different libraries out there for icons, so if you feel limited by one of them, you can definitely use others. The only thing that I will say is some of them are a little bit harder to install than others. So when you get into something like Bootstrap icons, you see this thing that says npm I Bootstrap icons, and you're like, ooh, shiny, I want to try that. Hold off on anything npm related. Once we get into Node, we will be doing a much deeper dive on npm and how we can install. npm stands for Node Package Manager, and npm is basically how we can install third-party packages into our own projects. So we will be getting into npm a little bit later.
I will say though that the icon selection on Bootstrap icon is more, I find it more versatile than Google Fonts. Maybe it's just me, but yeah.
Yeah, it's total personal preference. But yeah, whatever icon library you want to use is totally fine.
And as for experimenting with other websites, I would love to find a website where the nav bar is either vertically aligned, whether it be to the left or right, if we could try for that, and or something that's more of a sticky nav bar that kind of sticks with you as you scroll down.
Let me add a note for that, because I would want to do some research. Nav bars are one of those things that looks super easy until you go to make one, and then you go, wow, this is way harder than I thought. So we will start with a nav in tomorrow's project, the portfolio project. That will be more of a classic nav, but it will be responsive. So when you get down to a certain screen size, it will actually show you a menu button that you can click on and get that drop down. However, sticky navs and vertical navs are definitely very popular. So let me write those down, and I will see if we can incorporate them into a project. Joe did just ask for a carousel image, and so we will I will hopefully show you what that looks like in Bootstrap. So I don't know if Bootstrap doesn't do a good one where they have like 4 across. So let's do this. Okay, basic example. This is what I'm going to start with. So this will be the first Bootstrap component that we have seen. We've obviously used the Bootstrap grid. We've used some utilities like the flex and the text centering on the alignment side. But Bootstrap is most famous for their components. And these are components that kind of just ship out of the box, right? They are things that are styled that we don't need to add additional interactivity to or any additional styling to unless we want to, unless we want to go in and tweak it. So I'm going to take this entire section here, and I'm going to be careful where I paste it. The number one thing to keep in mind with when you are working with Bootstrap is making sure you know where you are pasting it in. So I would like it to work kind of where I've got my row. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. And it is going to show us these carousel items. So I'm going to start with just making the carousel work between the two images that we already have. And then I can maybe layer in getting 4 images to show at the same time. So first of all, I'm going to save this. I'm going to let Prettier run. And before I do anything, I'm going to see what it looks like. And other than the broken image, I think we are actually off to a good start. Kind of hard to tell though. So let's put our images in. I'm going to grab this one and drop it in for the first image. And for the first time, we see an alt tag. And whenever we use an image, we really should use an alt tag. Not only does that show up when we hover over the image like a tooltip, but that is for screen readers, so that when screen readers are going through and announcing what is on the page, it will read out the alt tag so that we have an idea of what is inside that image. So I'm going to say Tom and image Kim, and we'll make Kim our alt tag, and we'll see what shows up here. So I refresh, and not only do I have a broken image, which I was not expecting, got 3 items in here. Let me take that one out. Make some active. Try that again. Okay. Now we've got Tom showing up here, and if I click, my arrow over doesn't do anything. And I'm like, well, this is annoying. Bootstrap is just supposed to work. Well, what we will see in tomorrow's class as well is that if we go all the way back up to the introduction where we've been grabbing our link tag, there's another step in here. And yes, alt tags do help with SEO. We've been including Bootstrap CSS, but there's another word here that says and JS. We haven't dove into JavaScript yet, right? That is the module that is coming right after this one. But Bootstrap is not only a CSS framework. In order to make some of the interactivity like the carousel of Bootstrap to work, we need to include Bootstrap's JavaScript as well. So there's also this script tag in here that I'm going to copy, and script tags are recommended to go inside the body, but as the last element. So think about that as the opposite of your head tag. It has to do with some optimizations of getting the JavaScript to load. And normally we want our page content to load first and then to load in the interactivity. So if we throw our script tag down at the bottom and head back to our page, now when we click on the little carousel, we get it sliding across. Okay, that's pretty cool. Maybe Tom is a little too big. So if we take a look at our CSS, we applied that to the col 3, I am guessing. Edit profile, contact links, profile. How did? Oh no, we did it based off of the column width. That's how we did it. Because it was an image fluid, that image was getting shrunk down by the col 3. So let's see if we can kind of play in here and hijack this carousel, because when we think about a carousel, sometimes we think about it as the full width of the page, right? The way it's kind of working now, where when we click on the next button, it slides over to the next person. But sometimes we kind of want 4 items to show up or 3 items to show up. And then when we hit the next button, it makes another 4 items show up. So let's see if we can kind of hijack that. I'm going to come down and I'm going to duplicate Kim and Tom, just so we've got 4 items across. So it's taking up the full space. Then I'm going to take this entire div class row and try and move it into one of my carousel items. So I'm going to drop that in here. And then I will drop, let's make all of them Tom, just so we can play around. Because I have so many friends, I just like duplicating them. All right, and then I'm going to drop in Kim here. And we'll make it all Kim. So I will save that. I'll come over here. Now we've got our 4 Toms. And if we click the arrow over button, we get all of our Kims. So that's just a very precursory introduction to Bootstrap items, but Bootstrap is doing a lot of work here, right? So Bootstrap is not only giving us these arrows, which we didn't put in, right? We didn't get the Bootstrap icons. We didn't get material icons for the arrows. We didn't have to worry about the positioning of those arrows on top of the items. We were able to go take this pre-built component, drop it in, and then Bootstrap not only gave us the styling of everything, it also gave us the interactivity. With the warning there that that interactivity only works if we've got the JavaScript tags in place. So once we put that that script tag down at the bottom, which we got from the same place that we get the link tag, that JavaScript is making these arrow buttons work so that when I click on it, I get the nice little animation between those people. Joe, is that what you were looking for?
There was. Yeah, I was looking at it for last night for that Netflix thing. I didn't know if there was a. I knew there was a Bootstrap element for it. I just didn't know if it was easier or quicker to do something like right in the CSS.
Or a true carousel where you kind of want to slide the whole group of them together, the Bootstrap one is definitely better. Otherwise, you could do it as a max width on your container and then set the overflow scroll so that you could scroll left and right. So a carousel and horizontal scroll kind of accomplish the same thing with 2 different styles. So it depends of what you want your user experience to be. All right. Any other ideas? Anything else that we want to build into this page? All right. I've got one final thing to show you. While we have the time, I'm going to touch on the VS Code extensions. 1 second to find them. Oh. All right. I'll just do it off the fly. One is called really need my list. Why can I not find that?
I'm actually more surprised people still use Internet Explorer, to be honest.
Only 0.5% of the internet still uses it. So
That's
it
crazy.
is definitely shrinking. All right, well, I cannot find my list, so I guess I am going to nope, found it. One is called rainbow tags. And these are totally optional, so I would recommend that you play around with these, but then make sure that you're also comfortable with uninstalling them as comfortable as you are with installing them. So rainbow tags, you can see, kind of changes the color of all of your divs. So if I install this and then take a look at my index.html, you're going to see my divs turn into all of these different colors. That is helpful for finding the matching one. So this button and this button now are the same color. This yellowish orangish div if you scroll up, you can see will match with this div all the way up here. So this is a visual way to be able to match up your tags. If you find that helpful, that is totally fine. For me, the reason I don't like it is because I'm used to my tags being a certain color, right? And so this is one of those things that it's not built in by default. But if you find it helpful, you are totally welcome to use it. I didn't actually find my list. I just remembered the name of this one. So that is a taste of extensions for you tonight. We will get some more coming to you down the line. We'll kind of feed them to you as you go. Prettier is definitely the one that I hands down use the most. We've already seen both live server and live share. And so hopefully you're getting a taste of the world of extensions and what is out there. All right, final call for questions tonight. All right.
Can we
Tomorrow.
start on our pop quiz or do we have to wait till class?
I would say wait, because it's meant to be kind of a timed thing. So it's meant to say what can you accomplish in an hour, basically. So tomorrow we will start with our pop quiz. We will give you guys an hour-ish to work on recreating a website. The goal of that is to actually ask questions as you're working on it, right? So sharing your screen, saying I'm stuck here, saying, hey, can I get help debugging this? So that's the goal of tomorrow. And then in the second half of class tomorrow, we will start on our final portfolio or our final HTML project, our portfolio website. That will take a couple days, so we'll get a jump start on that tomorrow. That will carry into next week. And then, believe it or not, we will be wrapping up the HTML module and heading into JavaScript. Kind of exciting stuff. So I will see you all tomorrow. Have an awesome evening.
Have a great night, everybody.
You as well.
I'll stick around for a minute too, in case anyone has questions.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right.
Just a oh, were you gonna say something?
No, you go ahead.
Yeah. Just a quick comment. You mentioned vertical scrolling, and so I also had even more time yesterday. Don't know where I found it, but that's besides the point. And so do you remember how the Netflix page essentially kind of displayed an error message when we when we essentially shrunk it down to
Yeah.
pixel size that was too small? Yeah, so instead of I kind of negated it by setting I believe a min width, and then I also did the overflow X scroll. And so essentially it allowed me to after the point where and I also used the calc CSS function. So like that all compiled together made it so that that at a certain pixel min width, I was able to then allow the user to essentially scroll and it wouldn't distort any of the various components. So that was pretty cool to experiment with.
Yeah, that's a really good approach. You want to be careful with horizontal scrolling because anyone on a mouse usually doesn't have the ability to scroll horizontally. So if you're on a trackpad, it's really easy because you just go left and right. So horizontal scrolling is something where it's like there's nothing wrong with it, but oftentimes you want to kind of do a hybrid approach with the carousel and the horizontal scrolling. So you give them the option to click a button to scroll over, or they can use the trackpad to scroll over. So yeah, that is the way that you solved it is pretty much the way Bootstrap themselves solved it. So if you go on the Bootstrap website on your phone, I'm sorry, on the Netflix website on your phone, you can kind of see how they designed around it. So yeah, all great CSS properties. I'm glad to see that you're playing around with.
Awesome.
Cornelius, do you have a question?
Sorry, yeah, so definitely, so you did answer my curiosity of when on making a web page when if you wanted to scroll through like images or text like in the MySpace one where you so Bootstrap will automatically apply that when you have more than one items.
No. They won't automatically apply it. It is something that you need to like add in through all of the classes that we added.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bootstrap wouldn't have applied it unless we had all of these different classes applied to it. So the whole notion of carousel, carousel inner, carousel item, all of those have to be added in order to get the carousel to work.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say too, I was thinking about because I see on like some websites where when you go to the home page, you see like text or posts and you have like the little arrows to go through in those text boxes. I was wondering if that's something that will be taught later on. In
What do you mean by the arrows in the text boxes?
it's like let's say like you see I don't know what's a good website to reference. But it was like back in the day, it's pretty old school, not too far. Where it will say like here's the latest news and you can click the arrows to go to the next like text or news, or it'll be like, oh, this previous one was about the news, this one's about an update on something. So
Yeah,
something like that.
so that's called a carousel, and that's
Oh,
the
okay.
the functionality we built in tonight. And we will be seeing additional Bootstrap components. So you know, certain things like a nav bar. If I say nav bar, you're like, oh, of course I know what a nav bar is, right? But then there will be other components that you're like, oh, I just didn't know it was called a card, and now that I know it's called a card, I'm going to see cards all over the internet. And it's going to make a lot more sense. So one of the, I don't want to say the hardest parts about learning Bootstrap, but one of the challenging parts is just knowing everything that is built into it, right? Um, and it's not to say that you've got it all memorized, right? Like I use carousels pretty frequently, but I would have no idea how to do a carousel without the documentation, right? So what did I do? I went, I copied it, I pasted it in, and then I started modifying it. So with Bootstrap, a lot of the times it's just knowing the name of the component or knowing the layout that you're trying to achieve. And then once you get more familiar with those components, they become much easier to practice with.
All right, thank you.
All right. So I have a question.
Yeah.
So with the pop quiz, we just only doing like just part of a site, right?
Yep.
Okay, so does that matter, or like for example, if I want to do something has like something on the site has like images like on stack at each other inside of a box with text, would that matter, or
Yeah, so it's you kind of want to pick a site that you think you can rebuild in about an hour. And if you end up rebuilding it in less than an hour, then you can go find another section of the site and try that one. What you want to not pick is something with a lot of interactivity, right? So like the carousel is borderlining on too interactive, right? So we don't want to necessarily do something where it's like, oh, I can click the edit name button, type in a new name, hit OK, and have that appear on the page. Well, we don't know how to do that yet, right? That you need JavaScript for that. So short of interactivity, you can pick whatever you would like, whatever site or whatever section of a site you would like to do. But what you want to do is try and scope it out and say, all right, can I achieve this in roughly an hour?
yeah, okay, and another question too, where do you get those little extensions, you know, the one that you gave us like at or around orientation with the extension that connects to like the HDMI to your monitor? Where do you get those from?
We get them from Amazon. I don't recommend any specific brand. I would say spend under $10 on them. If you're going to like Best Buy or Staples, they'll probably be closer to 20. But the name of them is a USB-C to HDMI adapter. They're normal, like I said, on Amazon, don't spend more than 10-ish dollars on them. The only other word of warning I have for you is that your Mac can only support one external monitor. At least the M1 through M3 chips, the non-Pros and Maxes will only support one external monitor unless it's an iPad.
Okay.
So as much as I would love to say go, you know, grab another adapter and then you can have two external monitors, it is a limitation of the hardware, at least of the laptops that we provide.
Okay.
Joe, you have a question?
Yeah, two quickish questions. One, how do you deal with any eye strain or headaches that you get throughout the day staring at a screen?
I personally have not had a ton of eye strain. When I get my glasses, I do get the blue light filtering ones. Back in the day, I also had ones called Gunners, Gunnars, which
I remember
are
those.
yellow tinted. And then I liked the styling of those glasses so much that I started getting the Gunner frames and then taking them to my eye doctor, and they would do like custom frame inserts for them, or for custom glass inserts for them. I don't know if the blue light filtering actually helps at all. Fortunately, I'm not a big I've never had a ton of eye strain, so that hasn't been a problem for me. I do get migraines, but I don't think it's blue light induced. So yeah, just Gunners is an option. There was a Mac program called Flux, F.LUX, that tinted your monitors for you, and then Mac OS thought that that was a really good idea and built that in, and they call it Night Shift. So I recommend turning on Night Shift, because it just kind of yellow tints everything. The only word of caution there is if you're doing a lot of hex work or a lot of color picking work, that will obviously influence the color. But night shift can be a really good thing if you are a night owl. It kind of just gives everything more of a yellow hue, which is supposed to be easier on your eyes.
All right, and then second question, how do you get through any like code block or procrastination? You just go work on another part of the project, you get up, go do something else.
Post-it notes and notebooks. So make sure I didn't have anything. No, I didn't have anything proprietary on that page. Sorry, I've just got to check what I'm sharing. So yeah, code block is definitely something that I run into. I think it's as equally important to have time off the computer as it is to have time on the computer. So when I am blocked, when I feel like I just like can't get enough motivation to get started, I either go to another project, and oftentimes this side project has to be something that isn't I shouldn't say isn't beneficial, but isn't something that like has been requested of me, basically. So one of the things that I did, I had code block last week and updated the YouTube uploader bot to generate the thumbnails off OpenAI's Dolly. And I was like, all right, that's like just a fun thing that I can do. I've worked with OpenAI a little bit before. That would be fun to be able to download that image, figure out how to upload it to YouTube. And once I got that done, I was like, all right, now my code juices are flowing, and it was much easier to get the tasks done at work that I had to do. So a fun project can be a good idea. A different kind of thing can be helpful. Sometimes it's just like I don't want to write code, but I still am sitting down, I'm working. And so I will like go work in a Google spreadsheet, or I'll go answer emails, or I'll go work on a task that isn't code related but is still beneficial. Or I'll say, you know what, I'm just sitting here, and because I'm sitting here not gaining any momentum, I'm doing crap on my computer, like watching YouTube videos and like stuff that isn't helpful, right? And so I've got a room in my house that is just for my office, and I'm never in this room unless I'm working. And that is a really important mental barrier for me. So when I find myself farting around and not really being productive in here, I leave the room, right? And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go garden, I'm gonna go do laundry, I'm gonna go do something else, because this room is meant to be my productivity sanctum, so to speak. And so I try to, if I try all of my tricks and I'm still not being productive, I go, all right, let me leave the room, let me go work on something else. And then when I come back into this room, I'm going to use that as kind of a mental breaker. to jumpstart my work. Hopefully that answers some questions. Doesn't work for everyone, but
Yeah, I definitely do that latter part where I have my set spaces where if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I get up and leave.
yeah. And it's really weird. Like on the weekend, I will unplug my laptop and go sit on the couch. And even though I don't have all my monitors and everything I'm used to, it's like, no, I'm doing something separately on the weekend. So like I shouldn't be in my office. All right. Well, have a great night, everyone. I will see you tomorrow.